Warning: the following podcast contains graphic content that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Discretion is advised. The papatangosierradelta podcast is available free of charge thanks to the support of Cracked Armor.
Their mission is to raise awareness for PTSD, TBI, and mental health to support those who struggle. By creating an army of warriors who represent the gear, their hope is that it will send a message to others that they are not alone.
Go to crackedarmor.com. Say hi to Mark Long, read about the story, and find some research information about PTSD. And if you can, look good while supporting Cracked Armor by buying some gear.
10-9, did you say Papa Tango Sierra Delta? 10-4.
There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.
This is episode 40 of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. My name is Larry Payton, and I have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. The introduction today will be responses to questions from listeners. I'd thrown out on Instagram probably a couple of weeks ago that if anyone had any questions, feel free, bang them through. I will be honest, transparent, upfront, just ask away. I will tell you that I have not prepared for any of these questions, so as I'm going to read the question out, it's really my first time, thinking about how I'm going to respond to it. You're just going to get shit in the raw, I guess is the easiest thing to say. The first question, Larry, just wondering if it's common for people you think are close friends, but who ghost you after you are off on long-term disability. Yes, that is common. It is very, 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 very common. Pretty much everyone I hear from, who are struggling with mental health issues, say that it's like they don't hear from anybody at all. And I can say the exact same thing. Most people that I had maintained some sort of a relationship prior to being off duty, I've not heard from. That said, I think people really, when you talk about, the friends that aren't contacting you, I think they really just don't know a lot of times what the fuck they're supposed to say. I mean, it's not like, hey man, how's your things healing up after your knee surgery? How's that cast now that you got it off your ankle and you're not fucking in that boot anymore? That must be pretty good. And it's good to hear from you, but they don't know what to do or what to say when it comes to, hey man, how's your fucking PST? How's your anxiety? Is like depression still kind of bugging you, or you kind of knocking that out of the park now? You getting by there on that? Not an issue anymore. You got that one gone. Good. Yeah, that's great. It's just people don't know what to say or how to talk to you. If you're one of those people who are on the other side, please reach out. The fucking worst thing about mental health is you feel there is such a stigma. You feel alone. If you have friends that are struggling, don't leave it. Reach out to them. Let them know. I mean, just fucking reach out and say, hey man, did you watch the football game? Have you caught up on fucking whatever book you're reading or anything? It doesn't even have to be, how was your mental health? I mean, if you're comfortable with that, great. But if you're not, just reach out. Don't fucking ghost, man. Don't ghost. Next question. What's a piece of advice you would give to the younger version of you and your wife? Don't become a fucking police officer. That's I say that kind of fucking laughing. I'm very, very proud of what I've done and what I've sacrificed, but I also have no problem saying that I had absolutely no fucking idea what I was getting myself into. I had no idea that I was serving my community, serving my country, but I would also be sacrificing myself. And the killer with the sacrifice is just the ultimate lack of support. I remember when I was in the application process, one of the things I said that I loved about police is that if something ever happened to you, there was a fucking huge regimental funeral. Like it fucking people came together. You were honored, you were respected. And that was a big, big deal. Just such support for your family, for those that have, you've left behind. And it's not just forgotten. That's true. But if you don't need a funeral, then you don't really seem to be supported. And for those brothers and sisters that have chosen to extinguish their lights, there is no big regimental funeral because there's no institutions or organizations that actually look at that and say, well, that was a death in the line of duty. No, they don't look at that at all. Something needs to be done to change things. There needs to be more support there. There needs to be more decency amongst the organizations, amongst upper fucking management people, amongst their brothers and sisters that even we work with sometimes that, I don't even say sometimes, I mean a lot of times that there can be such toxicity, and not just within policing. I've spoken to firefighters, fucking paramedics, it seems just rampant. Correctional officers, obviously military, fucking dispatchers. I mean, it's just kind of just more and more of these things are popping in my head here as I speak, but it just needs to be more support. And I think that's the biggest thing that sticks with me is that I had no idea what I was doing. Now, would I have changed my mind if I did? Well, fuck no. Likely no, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't have had any concept whatsoever about what that meant. What the fuck do you mean you're going to have a mental health problem? You're going to be a fucking train wreck down the road. What does that mean? I don't understand how that's possible. No, not going to happen. So another piece of advice I would have given my younger self is to start talking to someone. Don't fucking ever wait for your organization to help you. Don't think that they have your six. Don't think that they are going to come and make sure that you are fine. They will not. You need to make sure that you're taken care of. You need to make sure that you're first. And that's a solid piece of advice to anyone who's starting, and that's something that I would have told myself younger. Do you remember the moment of clarity when you realized that you had CPTSD, fear or relief? That's a great question because I'd received a call from a friend of mine. We were both worked patrol in K-Div in Alberta, and you know, it was Hannah. It was it was. If you've heard this fucking podcast, you've heard me talk about working alone in Hannah. And he called me probably about, I'm going to say, I don't know, man, maybe 6 years ago, maybe 7, maybe. And I hadn't heard from him. Well, I haven't heard from him in over a decade. And it was just a really random call. And it was like, hey, man, how are things going? How are you doing? Well, I'm fine. Things are good. No worries whatsoever. And he started talking to me about my mental health and if it's something I'd ever looked at. And I was just sort of like, man, I'm fine. Like, I don't, like, what's the issue? You know, and he had shared his journey, and he had shared that I needed to maybe at some point come to a realization that what we saw and did as part of our job in Hannah was not normal, and that we had normalized a lot of things that weren't. The conversation stuck with me. I mean, it sat in the back of my mind a little bit. Nothing major. And so for a while after that, I just kind of went, yeah, man, anyone who does this job's got fucking PTSD. Everyone's fucked up. If you do this job long enough, you've got fucking PTSD. But I really didn't grasp the complexities of what PTSD was. I really didn't understand that PTSD is much more than just shitty fucking memories. And I really had no concept whatsoever about how much I'd gone downhill over the past couple of decades. Now, we all know after the mass shooting, I've spoken before, life went downhill for me. There's a lot more to this story that I will be sharing at some point. Not yet, but I will be sharing. Anyway, I remember, going to my psychologist during the first visit. And in that session, I had said to her right off the bat, I know I have PTSD, so we can fucking move on from that. I know that. It was about 2.5 months later when we had a conversation and she officially diagnosed me with CPTSD. And it's funny because you say fear or relief, and I would just say that it actually kind of sucked the wind out of my lungs. It's really fucked. It's something that I had thought I had, but then when someone told me I had it, like someone who's knowledgeable, someone who can diagnose for this, told me I had it, fucking things seemed to change a bit. It hit me. It hit me hard. So I would say I was closer to fear than relief. I mean, I've spoken with other people before that feel relieved when it's like, yeah, man, like you put a name on it and that was it. I fucking like, all right, I'm going to go beat this. Sean Taylor mentioned that before on the show. Yeah. That wasn't the way I took it. at all. I was fucking shocked. Oddly enough, shocked. Another question. The role of the organization in supporting employees' mental health. That's funny. That question must be like, that's funny. I don't even know what to say to that. That's good. All right. Let's go to another question. Going through the motions versus actively working on PTSD. I think a lot of times, personally, I don't really know if I'm going through the motions or actively working. There's days that I'm pretty sure I'm actively working. However, when I go back and think about it, I fucking was lost. There are other days I feel like I just have been going through the motions. And then when I look back at it, I kind of go, Jesus, you were growing right there. You were post-traumatic growth in those periods. So I don't really identify as it's happening. I certainly try to always actively work on, mitigating the symptoms of PTSD. But there are days that, I'm not going to fucking lie to you, there are days that are really, really bad. But be okay with the fact that there are days that just fucking making it through the day is a progression. There are brothers and sisters who don't, that can't make it through a day. The effects of your environment on your healing and trauma, finding balance. My environment is huge on my healing and trauma, both positive and negative. Positively, I've said a million times already, my wife is my rock. My family is my rock. Yeah, I wouldn't get through this without them. No fucking chance. Then there's other things in my environment, though, that, this week I decided it was a good idea to eat at the Enfield Irving Big Stop, which is where the mass shooter in Nova Scotia was eventually terminated. And I thought that's a good way just to fucking push through, bull through, as my wife says. It's just always just bull your way through life, man. You just try to whatever's in your way, you just try to run through it. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Yeah, it turned out to not be a good day after that. And I really couldn't understand for a while why my day went shit, because I really didn't feel that affected me. But it did. I don't know how, but it did. So your environment plays a huge role on your healing and trauma. And you always need to work on finding that balance where you are pushing yourself a bit to be uncomfortable, but not overdoing it. Always work on you. Work on healing. Work on growing. And as I said a few minutes ago, some days that just means getting up in the morning and going to bed at night. And that was a progression. Do you have the ability to recognize when you're in the shit? Funny. Yes and no. Typically, I can tell you when I am triggered, or I'm getting triggered, or I can feel the rage level getting to a 3-4, which when it hits there, it fucking making it to 10 is all of a sudden not a big thing. So typically, yeah, I'm able to recognize that. However, there have been instances where all I can say is that I was completely outside of myself. I was dissociated from wherever I was, what was going on around me, and I was just fucking raging. I was just angry. At that point, I had no ability whatsoever to identify that I was fucking raging. It wasn't until a little while after, when I finally got grounded, that it was just, what the fuck happened? I don't understand what just happened. Well, the PTSD is what happened, buddy. That's something that hasn't happened to me in quite a while, but it did recently. And it's almost, I find that this fucking disorder, injury, whatever you want to call it, it's always there. It lurks in the background, and it needs to almost remind you every now and again, hey, bud, yeah, don't fucking think you got rid of me. And all I can say is that seems to have been what happened to me recently. So again, to go back to your question, am I able to identify when I'm in the shit? Yeah, most times. No problem whatsoever. I can give you a heads up that I'm starting to smell shit. We're getting close to it. And then every now and again, unfortunately, no, I can't until afterwards. The last question is, what surprised you the most when you started talking publicly about PTSD? The number of people that have been contacting me, the organizations that have contacted me, the number of psychotherapists, counseling therapists, psychologists from throughout the country, just to reach out and thank me or ask for my 2 cents on something. getting to go to the World Police Fire Games in Winnipeg, like that's what the fuck do you want me to go there? Yeah, that really surprised me. And I get messages all the time from people thanking me for being vulnerable and for speaking out. And I really do appreciate it. It really helps me go on sometimes, because there are many a fucking days that I'm like, why the fuck are you doing this? But I also, a lot of times, don't even really realize that I'm doing it, that I'm just trying to heal loudly, I guess. I really don't do a whole lot of things quietly. And so healing, I'm trying to, funny enough, look at that. I just got smacked right in the head by a thought there. I don't do many things quietly, but you know, one thing I do quietly is suffer. And writhe in pain, physically and mentally. That I do quietly. And that is what has gotten me to where I am now, that I am struggling with, obviously, mental health issues and some pretty fucking heavy physical health issues as well. However, seems like pretty much anything else I'm pretty loud at, pretty outspoken by, and kind of a zero fucks given sort of a thing, that this is me, this is who I am, and if you don't like me, that's okay, it's totally cool. Yeah, the number of people that have reached out really has surprised me. The podcast has now been heard in, I think, 40 countries. That's surprising. The friends that I've made that reach out with consistency because of the show, that's surprising. I would say the other thing that's most surprised me, how many of us are affected by post-traumatic stress. Let's take a quick break.
This episode of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast is brought to you thanks to the support and financial sponsorship of Cracked Armor. Go to crackedarmor.com, read the story, buy the gear, wear it, to send a message to others who are struggling that they're not alone.
Also, check out Willow Tree Farm, care of Jason Subkowicz, another member who is struggling with PTSD and who frequently updates his Instagram to share his story. You can follow him at jason.subkowicz. That's jason.Sierra Oscar Bravo Kilo Oscar Whiskey India Charlie Zulu.
We are back from the break. Thank you very much for sticking around to hear the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. On this episode, we're going to be talking with dispatcher Stacey Tetz. Stacey, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
So, as usual, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us about your journey.
Yeah, my name is Stacey Tetz, and I was born and raised in Calgary. And then in 2020, right as the pandemic started to ramp up, I moved to Vancouver Island. And I've been a dispatcher, like I said, for 10 and a half years. I started out with Calgary 911. I was just the police function. And now I essentially do the same thing here on the island, only it's the entirety of South Island. So we dispatch for 13 different jurisdictions.
And what's pretty cool is you're calling in today from the airport is it in Victoria or in Vancouver?
In Victoria, actually.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
All right. You're on the move. You're on the move. So I guess to the listeners, if you kind of hear some calls in the background, it's normal. Don't think that I've added those in to try and screw with your mind a bit. Stacey, so if you could, tell us about your time working Calgary 911. Tell us your experiences. I guess lead us down your path of how it is that you got to be where you are now.
Sure. It was definitely not something that I ever envisioned finding myself in. My dad was Calgary Fire for 34 years. And I went to the University of Calgary in a completely unrelated field and degree. And I was actually planning on going to medical school. I had aspirations of being a pathologist. And so when I finished my bachelor's degree, I was talking to my family about going back to school again. And my dad was like, hey, yeah, I'm pretty sure comms is hiring. You should look at that. He's like, you get 4 days off in a row, it'd be a really great part-time job. And that was 10.5 years ago. I never did end up going and following the medical path. I did end up going back to school, but just stuck with dispatch. Kind of interesting if you from a psychological standpoint.
Right. Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, nothing happens in dispatch. You don't hear anything. You don't deal with anything. I mean, it's pretty quiet, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, nothing at all.
So 10.5 years on the phone, listening to police only calls is what you were dealing with, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I know that there's different models in Canada, especially with the RCMP. But for Calgary and now on the island here, we have the call taking and dispatching is separate. So everyone starts out as a call taker, and then if you are, an A-type personality and I don't know, just apparently like pain and punishment, then you can do extra training and become a dispatcher.
Is it pain and punishment because you're dealing with cops all the time? Is that what it is?
No, I would never say that.
10.5 years. There's no doubt that, again, as I mentioned, a lot of things happened. And I mean, it leads us down a path where scars are left and traumatic incidents occur, and we're left with a lot of things. I presume that occurred to you as well.
Yeah. There's been some bad ones for sure. And it's, like you've mentioned on other podcasts and in talking with other first responders, it never ceases to surprise me what actually affects me and what I actually end up thinking about, weeks, months, years later. And it's not always what you would expect, which is interesting.
So tell us about that then. I mean, tell us about your journey in terms of when it is. I mean, if there's a specific thing that you don't have to share the story, but if, was it a series of events or was it a specific event, and how did life change thereafter?
I think one of the first ones that comes to mind is we had a really serious officer injury. This would have been back in about 2018. And I mean, I think I'd had calls before where officers were injured. This one, I think, is gonna stick with me for my entire life, likely, because I was listening to this person gasp for breath, and I thought that I was listening to him take his last breaths on the air. So that was a tough one, and it's there's been other ones that stick out. I have a really hard time with anything where I have to listen to gunfire on the air, or just when our officers are fighting for their lives, and you only get those little snippets as a dispatcher, like when the mic has been keyed. So of course your brain tries to fill in that information, and then unfortunately when you end up going to a debrief, you do get the rest of the information, and a lot of times it's actually worse than what you thought it was. So it's there's been some bad ones for sure, and it's I don't know if it's kismet or what, but I ended up actually, I was one of the two dispatchers that was on the BMO shooting here on the island, where our police officers were shot. None of them were killed, but we had multiple officers injured, and I encouraged the other dispatcher to start seeking some help, because I know that they were having a hard time dealing with some of the fallout. So we actually attended Wounded Warriors together just last week, and I've realized that I'm not dealing with a lot of things for the last 10.5 years very well. So a lot of learning and a lot of work to do for sure over some of the things that have happened here. Yeah, there's always a lot of learning, right? There's no doubt, and it's a road. There's a road to travel. Wounded Warriors, how was that experience? Can you tell us about that? It was, I highly recommend it to anyone who has ever kind of flirted with the idea. Maybe just gone onto the webpage. But it was really great. It was tough. It was 2.5 days of basically being in therapy, like intensive therapy with this group of complete strangers, but they're all first responders. And I wasn't sure what to expect. I had heard about it. I knew people that had been to it, but I didn't want to go into it with any expectations, because I wasn't sure how I was going to kind of fit into that group and into the work that they do. And so when they ask you, well, what are you looking to get out of this? And I said, if I come away from this with one thing, with one tool or one resource or one revelation that'll help me in the rest of my career, that would be fantastic. And I came away with a lot more than that for sure. There was one particular part that we were doing, and I ended up we're writing down kind of a timeline. And we're not sharing it with anybody. We're writing down a timeline, a trauma timeline, they called it. And one of the facilitators came over and sat down beside me and was asking me if I was okay. I'm like, oh, why are you sitting beside me? That's weird. Like, yeah, I'm fine. But do I not look fine? And then he's like, well, no. He's like, you're shaking and you're sweating and your face is like purple.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it really took me off guard completely. And I kind of stopped and I was like, holy fuck, like I'm literally shaking here. And it was pretty wild. It was very interesting because I did not expect that at all. So
wow.
Yeah.
Was there anything that hit that at that point? Do you remember if there was a certain activation that got you there, or?
Well, and it was, so again, like I was there because of the BMO, the Saanich BMO event from last year, and it wasn't that. And I had, unfortunately, I was a file, as much as we don't ever want to be files, but I went through domestic violence. And that was I ended that marriage in 2018, but unfortunately kept going. There was stalking and a lot of other things, and that individual ended up being charged with quite a few different things. So what I recognize is that I think when I was starting to shake and not be able to breathe and everything, I was writing some of those things down. And what struck me was that I'm curious as to what my career would have looked like and what would have affected me, and if it would have affected me different or greater or less had I not been going through the divorce and the reconciliation of domestic violence.
Yeah. I mean, that's brutal. That's, I'm very sorry to hear that you've had to endure that. I'm certainly happy to hear that you're no longer having to endure that, but yeah, that's, Stacey, that's tough. And so, you're processing that stuff at Wounded Warriors, and as well as all the shitty things that you've encountered over 10.5 years, inclusive of the Saanich BMO shooting. For those who aren't familiar with it, are you able to give just a brief on that? I mean, it can just be a news brief, nothing that you have to share any inside details on, but just there'll be a lot of listeners that don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. We in June 28th of 2022, while on a day shift, we had what started out as a relatively standard holdup alarm at BMO. But it quickly became not standard. It was very clear that it was real. And I mean, for, yourself and any other police officers out there, I mean, how many of them are? And it was active. And so what was identified is that they had two gunmen in the bank that were with like they had full body armor on and I think multiple weapons. And it just so happened that we had an ERT group that was in the area when the call came in, and so they responded. And when the officers went outside, when the bad guys went outside, they opened fire on our officers. And so they were all hit. I believe that there was 6 in total that were injured, and I was the backup dispatcher on it, and the initial dispatcher, as soon as EHS got on scene, he actually left, and he left the call completely, and so I took over the file for the next 9 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty ugly. So yeah, that was BMO. So that was the first time for me. I've heard gunfire on the air multiple times, but I've never heard those words, multiple officers down, which was tough. That'll never leave my head.
No doubt. And they all survived, though?
They did. They all survived. I don't know any of them personally, so I don't know where they're at with their healing journeys, and if any of them are coming back to work and what that's going to look like for them. But they did all survive.
Getting back to your time in Calgary, then, when we go back to 911 before we go back to the island, because we know while you're on the island, you at least go to Wounded Warriors. Were you sent by the agency for whom you work? How did you end up going to Wounded Warriors?
It was actually some of the individuals that were involved with the BMO shooting had been on their own, or they had family members that attended. Wounded Warriors has different groups and different programs dependent upon your role with first responders, which is fantastic. And so I knew people that had attended a couple of their programs, and then also when I was in Calgary, I knew some people that had gone. So so I'd kind of had some expectations and heard some great things about them.
And again, in Calgary then, so we know that happened while you're on the island, which is fantastic, and it's absolutely brilliant and beautiful that you had the opportunity to attend this, and very much needed. Zero doubt about it. What was support like when you worked in Calgary for mental health issues, for the well-being of the dispatchers?
You know, that's a tough question. I think that the intent has always been good. There's I don't think I'm going to be alone in this, and this is probably going to be very much the same for the island as well. But there's always the intent to support mental health initiatives, and increasing, for example, benefits aimed at mental health. I'm not always convinced, though, that the follow through is there. And in 10 and a half years, I have absolutely seen it improve. But as we know, that's one of the key pieces of PTSD is when you don't have the social support, whether that's sanctuary trauma or whatever it ends up being. But I definitely think that I've experienced that before, and unfortunately in Calgary for sure.
And what are some of the things you're experiencing with regards to your PTSD? Have you been diagnosed?
I haven't.
Okay.
And that's
minor. Yeah. I mean, that's a minor thing.
Yeah. It's, and I think it's going to be, the big part of it is that because I've never gone and seen anyone. And it's not that I didn't think I needed to. I certainly didn't think that I was immune. But for some reason, I have just never chosen to go. And now I'm recognizing that was a mistake.
Well, I think it's a mistake that all of us make, Stacey. I know I did for a long time. I mean, it took 20 years for me. So yeah, right. That's normal. And I understand as well exactly where you're from, because I mean, for a while, I was like, well, yeah, I have PTSD. I mean, fuck, everyone has it who does this job, but I really didn't have a solid grasp of it. I just knew that several traumatic experiences had made an impact on me. And again, I wasn't really yet at that point of knowing how much it was going to impact me, I guess, for lack of a better term. What are some things that, you have experienced symptom-wise that kind of make you lean that, yeah, I'm fucked up with this?
For me, a lot of it is I recognize that I have a really unfortunate tendency to push people away. So those isolation pieces. I'm also an athlete, which makes this really difficult. But I'll go through like a week or two phase where I refuse to go to practices, and essentially the only thing that I do is go to work. But I cancel appointments, cancel social engagements, that kind of thing, and basically just hide in my house if I'm not at work. That was kind of one of the main things, and then that started leading to pretty serious irritability, anger issues, and just lashing out at the people that I care about the most, which has definitely burned some bridges, unfortunately, and I've absolutely lost friends as a result of it. And then I think this, very fortunately for me, has subsided, but I was having some pretty major sleep interruptions, and it was. I think this is one of the pieces that I think I'm going to have to work out, but I couldn't. I was getting nightmares and night terrors and everything, but I couldn't always identify whether or not it was related to domestic violence or if it was related to work, and it kind of all melted into one dream or into one experience at night. So that was, yeah, but fortunately, like I said, that's kind of subsided at least to a little bit of a degree.
That's fantastic to hear, and that's good. And regardless, it doesn't really matter if where it came from. It's the reality that you're experiencing, because there's little doubt in my mind that you've had traumatic experiences at work, but you've also had some traumatic experiences at home, which is, that's tough. I mean, just in terms of a place to feel like you could be safe, a place to feel like you could actually decompress and get away from things. I mean, is it fair to say that you really didn't have that?
No, I didn't. And now understanding more and more about, like that heightened arousal and being activated and everything, I recognize that I was never able to relax, especially like during those 2 years when it was really bad, and like I didn't know what I was coming home to. And even if he wasn't home, I didn't know when he was going to be there and what that was going to look like when he did get home. And so I was never able to switch off and relax.
Jesus, that's got to just, wow. I mean, it's obvious that has left some scars. There's just no doubt about it. And yeah, I'm mystified as to how that had to feel. I know my own was, the shit that I went through was tough, but I do also know that, when I got home, things were safe, and I did have that, which, I mean, I guess, I can be guilty of taking that for granted. And I certainly, you had a very difficult situation, sis. There's no doubt about that. Athletics, does that help you with your symptoms? You find it, I mean, I know there's times that you don't want to go, as you said, you don't want to have to go to practices, you don't want to have to train, but do you find that helps at all when you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I credit, the first thing I did was, once the charges had been laid against my ex-husband, I knew I was spiraling out of control pretty quickly. And so I actually randomly, completely randomly, no rhyme or reason, I went and joined a rowing club. And I also use a wheelchair. I am a paraplegic. And so it was a regular rowing club, but they had a para team as well. And that's how one of the reasons I ended up on the island. I ended up on the island principally to get away from my ex-husband, because of the stalking that I mentioned, but also because this is where the Canadian national team lives for rowing.
Wow.
And so
that's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah. So I took to it really quickly, and they basically said to me, if you want to continue with this and you want to take it further, then we recommend that you move to the island if it's available. So I did, and it was great, and it was fantastic. And I 100% I credit rowing with saving my life, because I'm not sure where I would be if it if I didn't have that as an outlet, for sure.
And what kind of rowing team are you on?
So I actually no longer row.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very sadly, and a very boring story. But it's apparently, apparently Rowing Canada was having some political issues that I really actually don't know very much about. But sadly, the para team for Team Canada collapsed. I don't know where they're at with that now, but this is, and all of these pieces of bad luck that, maybe I had, this is a stroke of excellent luck. At a rowing event, I happened upon this lovely lady. At the time, we were still wearing masks, so I couldn't even pick her out of a crowd. But she came up to me and she said to me, she's like, I don't mean to be rude. And this is a regatta. This is like a race that I was at, and I was about to race like in the next, half an hour kind of thing. She's like, I don't mean to be rude. And she's like, but you really don't look like a rower. She's like, you look like a power lifter. She's like, have you ever considered doing like para powerlifting or para weightlifting of any kind? And I remember being like a little bit taken aback and maybe even like mildly offended.
I know, like when you said that, I'm sort of sitting here going, fuck you. And then, wait, now this might be a compliment. Hold on a second. Wait, right?
Exactly. And like I was like, no, like I'm happy with rowing. I'm happy with my choices. And this was the event was actually the Canadian Nationals. And I ended up winning a bronze medal. So
Boom.
I was pretty right. Like I was pretty happy with myself. And I'm like, oh, screw you, lady. And then it was just like a very short 4 months later that the para team was no longer. And so I remembered what she had said. And again, I have no idea who she is, but I ended up reaching out to a couple of contacts and resources on the island and saying, hey, like, anybody know anything about para powerlifting? And so now I'm actually a para powerlifter, and I just actually won a silver medal at the Parapan America's Cup in Mexico last month.
Holy shit. Okay, to start, congratulations. That's fucking awesome. Secondly, that lady was right, because you got a bronze in rowing and a silver in powerlifting. I mean, that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, it was like, just absolutely amazing. Like I don't know, I'm not really big into like spirituality or anything like that, but I mean, something else was at work there, because it was very cool.
I agree. Look, I'm with you. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm not really sure how to attribute it, what you want to attribute it to. People are very spiritual, and that's fantastic. But there are some things at times that are working in the background. They just have to be. I mean, it's just, that can't be a fucking coincidence. No way that rowing team that you moved to the island for was going to collapse a few months after that. I mean, how is it that you could say that's a boring story, Stacey? That's a fantastic story.
Yeah. I'm just never sure if it's like, I don't know, like maybe it's just happened to everybody. I have no idea.
No. I don't think I've won a silver medal since high school, Stacey. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And so do you have any other games coming up that you're going to be competing in?
I do, yeah. So it's been a wild ride. So next month, I've got, I'm 5 weeks out right now from the World Cup for para powerlifting, which is in Dubai.
Ooh.
Yeah, but I don't know who the heck wants to go to frigging Dubai in frigging August, but
it's going to be a little toasty. Yeah.
It might be a little hot.
might be a little on the warm side.
Possibly, yes. This is what I've been told. So, so off to Dubai for the World Cup, and then I don't know where I'm at with this, but I've been what they call long listed for the Pan Am Games, which so I'm not quite sure how that's looking. I think they probably want to see what I do in Dubai. And if I do make the Canadian team for the Pan Am Games, that is in November. And then basically I'm trying to see if I can make it, and if not, how close I can get to the Paralympics, which are next year in Paris.
That's just amazing. That would be, wow. That's fantastic. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a good side to this, which is something I think that listeners can take away, is that despite, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Stacey, so, I mean, correct me if I'm missing kind of the background of this, but you've been through a very tough time in terms of doing your time with Calgary Police. Support being what it is, it got better. However, you had to work through things a lot on your own. I know that. Home wasn't a safe place. You were the victim of domestic violence and stalking, as you said. You move to the island because you're rowing, and this is a better place to go for rowing. All of a sudden, someone comes out of the crowd and says, I think you should power lift. 4 months later, the rowing team collapses, and now you're a para-athlete in powerlifting who has won medals. And what I see from this, Stacey, is just despite what shit has been doled out to you in life, you found a way to fucking survive and cut through it. I'm not sure if you realize that yourself, but you are truly a warrior.
Thank you. I've been grappling with I think all of these things, and I really appreciate the way that you put that, because I think that we all, it's not just me, we all grapple with these horrific things in our personal lives and in our work lives. And so, but we also grapple with these successes as well, and sometimes it's really sad to think about, well, why can't we let ourselves enjoy this? And I think that is also a symptom of being a first responder at times.
I agree 100%. I'm with you. Is there some advice then that you could give people in terms of, our listener base are typically people who are struggling with some kind of operational stress injury, or PTSD, whether it be childhood PTSD, going through adult that has nothing to do with work, or families and close ones of those people. Is there something you can share? I mean, is there a lesson, something you can share, something that you can pass along, a piece of advice even, to say, this is what I did. This is how I managed to get through. This is how I managed to be a warrior and survive.
Yeah. I touched on the fact that I truly believe that rowing saved my life. I think that there is a rowing out there for everybody, whether it is rowing or lifting or not even sport, if it's chess or something. But if it pops into your head and it's something that you're interested in, and it's healthy and positive, don't fight it. And even if you don't feel like going, even the simple act of going onto your phone and looking up local clubs or local groups or like whatever your jam is, even that's a step in the right direction, because that's what I did with rowing. And then when rowing was no longer a thing, that's what I did with powerlifting. And I learned all there was to learn about it, and then started looking for where I could do that and who I needed to talk to. So just, if it takes you a little while, like if you're going to knit, and it takes you a little while to find a knitting club, then take the time and figure it out, like whatever it is. But if it's positive and it's something that you can focus on and it's something that's yours, do it.
Awesome. I absolutely love it. And I think that's a lesson that every single one of us can take, including me, that at times I am guilty of dropping the ball on that. And yeah, having that thing that you absolutely love becomes a huge way for you to, deal with a lot of your stresses and pressures, but if nothing else, to escape them for a short time in a much healthier way than it would be, at the end of a bottle. That's fantastic, Stacey. That is fantastic. I'm going to open the floor up. If there's anything at this time that you would like to share, anything that you would like to add, anything you'd like to say, the floor is yours.
I like listening to your podcast and listening to similar podcasts and connecting with other first responders, police, fire, medics, and also ex-military. And my brothers and sisters in dispatch as well. Anyone who's listening, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service. And B, hang in there and keep fighting the good fight.
This has been a real pleasure chatting with you today, Stacey, and I really appreciate that you made time at the airport to do so. And it's early over there. You're 4 hours behind me. So yeah, we started this at 08:30 your time. So it's, yeah, I really appreciate you making the time for this. I know you're a very busy lady and we've been trying to get together for a while. This is awesome. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And for everyone who's listening, just in terms of a takeaway from this, I mean, life has thrown a lot of curveballs at Stacey, and yet she's managed to continually find a way to work through. She's managed to survive, and not just survive kind of crawling out of it, but survive in the way that she has thrived. So, although she is certainly still dealing with her injuries that were sustained as a result of her work, as well as a result of an abusive marriage, Stacey has found post-traumatic growth. She is growing. Yeah, she is still struggling. But despite that, she is growing. And you can hear in her voice, there is certainly a sense of happiness, a sense of appreciation, a sense of a love of life. And that is something that will stick with me. That was very refreshing. My name is Larry Payton. I have your 6. Please have mine.
Don't go away. There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all